Today, talking about Midway means referring to sagas such as NBA Jam or Mortal Kombat. The first one marked a milestone in sport games at the beginning of the 90s, and Mortal Kombat is still a reference fighting game that has won a space into the esports and participates in mass events, such as the EVO, an annual esports tournament that focuses exclusively on fighting games. However, Midway Games was known once for being a company that distributed other successes, such as the Space Invaders of Taito and the Pac-Man of Namco, that have marked our culture forever. But then, in 1976, Midway presented one of its own arcade games. It wasn't just any arcade game. It was a submarine combat simulator game. It was Seawolf. Submarines had always been in the media, and still they are. If Hunter Killer, The Hand of the Red October, Run Silent, Run Deep, The Enemy Below, and Crimson Tide have something in common beyond its excess of testosterone, is that they are submarine films. Film industry had always known they are something, and with Seawolf, the turn of video game industry had arrived. Let's take a look at this classic title and the impact it left on the video game history and legacy. In retrospect, there's nothing new about developing a simulator. In arcade sphere, there are examples such as Outrun, Hang-On, Ferrari F355 Challenge, or Afterburner, which we've already talked about, and who doesn't remember the immersion of the R360 cabinet in which G-Locker Battle was played? Consoles and computer also made its contribution in the field of immersion through racing wheels, light guns, motion controllers and... Okay, I think we got it. Introducing immersion mechanics into video games had paid off, but it also has shown which was a bad choice and when the technology was not ready for the next step. Looking for breaking down hardware and software barriers is something that always has been kept in mind. Of course, none of this had happened when Seawolf came out. Those were the golden years of Atari, with Breakout, Space Invaders, Pong, Asteroids. If we omit a few exceptions, such as Grag Track 10, which introduced a racing wheel, or That Race, which was released the same year that Seawolf and brought about the first great controversy regarding violence in video games, most of the titles were developed in arcade machines with a similar design, in a standardized format. I mean, it's not that there had never worked immersion. The first light gun ever is previous to video games. We present you the electromechanical game Seabird Rail Light from 1936. Seabird made this kind of games popular during the Second World War by introducing the battle theme, resulting in Kill the Jap and Try the Jap, in which the player had to shoot Japanese soldiers, hit the science rats, or buy defense bonds and stamps, in which the player had to shoot a harmful Hitler, while it was urged to buy war bonds. There were non-battle themed versions such as Jailbird, Shoot the Bartender, Shoot the Mother-in-Law, oh boy. Anyway, the idea of introducing mechanical elements in order to improve immersion was nothing new. Not even about submarines. In fact, to know Midway idea origins, we must go one more time outside the field of video games, namely to 1965. That same year, after 2 decades of movement, a merger between two companies took place in Japan. David Rosen, a former soldier who had previously been involved in the Korean War, had been managing Rosen Enterprises, a company that had gone from exporting Japanese art to the American market to controlling a part of imports of photo booths and arcade machines to Japanese soil. However, a year earlier, another merger had led to the birth of Nihon Goraku Busan, dedicated to manufacturing, importing and distributing of arcades, machines and gramophones. At the head of this company were Arvin Bromberg, his son Bromley Bromberg, Richard Stewart and Ray Lemaire. David Rosen, concerned not just about this new competitor but also about an in danger of collapsing market, proposed to Nihon Goraku Busan to join forces as part of his last-ditch attempt to save its own skin. Nihon Goraku Busan accepted, and that's how it was born Sega Enterprises. Couldn't the move have gone better for Rosen? Became then the first president of the new company. He decided that the time of innovation had come. With enough capital, but with no staff in order to develop their own electromechanical games, they offered young developers a job with a 5-day work week and more holidays off than any other Japanese company. Hisashi Suzuki, the earliest documented Sega employee that would become one of its main executives, spoke about it for Famitsu DC. At the time, we were looking for work. Pretty much the only companies that had a 5-day work week as a rule were those founded by foreign outfits. Sega had that, and the third Friday of every month was an off day too. It was just an unthinkable number of holidays. Then, Sega started to develop arcades for the Japanese market, while the sale in the United States was commissioned to an American and crucial company for Seawolf, Belly Manufacturing. There was a lot of money in the agreement, but a successful game which had never been thought to be for export changed Sega's mind. An electromechanical game about submarines. Periscope. The story of this game is involved in a rather debate about whether the original idea was from Sega or from a less known company by then, Nakamura Seisakusho, recognized today as Namco. In one way or another, Sega's Periscope was a truly decisive game not just for Seawolf, but for the entire business model of arcades. It offers a space for up to 3 players, has some lights, sounds, plastic waves and rails on which the target boats run. Various sources pointed out a resounding success in international fairs such as the 14th Hotel Equipment Exhibition, held as Paris Expoport de Versailles in 1967, or the Exhibition of Amusement Equipment, which took place a year later at Hotel Royal Lancaster in London. Sega was ready and decided to sell its game in the United States, but they weren't able to manufacture it there by themselves. They depended completely upon their American partner Bally, so they reduced the size of the cut to adapt it to a single-player mode and exported it directly from Japan. It was still an enormous machine, heavy and with an expensive production, so they imposed to their distributor a selling price of $1,295, nearly double that the standard at that time, around $395. After receiving complaints, they suggested they charge 25 cents per game, instead of the common price of 10 cents. Yep, it can be said that Periscope generalized this price per game, a standard since its arrival at American arcade amusements in 1968. The rest of the company saw Sega's arrival as an actual danger. Little did they take to act. One of them, Midway Manufacturing Company, surprised the world 2 years later in 1970 with a smaller size and cheaper Periscope revision. Its name was Sea Devil. Behind that movement was an old acquaintance of Sega that had bought Midway a year before and that resented the change of strategy of the Japanese company. Bally Manufacturing. Sea Devil already had all that were about to be part of Seawolf. A periscope to aim at ships that sail from side to side, time-limited missiles, and an incredible capability to adapt technology to their circumstances. On the front, a panel with a 3-dimensional optical effect emulates the depth of a true control panel, while a combination of light and sounds tried to get people's attention. At its back, it's possible to access to the typical pinball electromechanical mechanism that allows Sea Devil to control multitude of features. To the common options of general volume or time per game, there were added individual controls of different sounds, such as the missile explosion when hitting a ship or the submarine radar, which could be in operation even during the game over state. But the true wonder was in another place. Through a system of mirrors, the game was able to douse its sight by hiding the enemy ships and the scenario in front of the player's feet. With the periscope, the player was looking ahead, but down. At the same time, thus was able to aim left and right with a simple jar system. When firing, a light goes down, and if the target is hit, a flash of red light illuminates the stage. The result? one of the best electromechanical games ever. Sea Devil was a technical success, but it was also a charity success. Pong was about to be released in 2 years, and for the American game-playing public, video games embodied technological dreams in a way that pinball tables and electromechanical games never could. Hundreds of arcade owners turned their backs on the cranky devices that once filled their pockets and rooms. As Bob Lawton, founder in 1952 of Fun Spot Arcade in West Beach, New Hampshire, said, video games offered a wider assortment of entertainment, and since video games had fewer moving pieces, they were more reliable. Ask anyone who ran electromechanical games back in the day and they will tell you the same. You can do so much more with a video game than you can with a plastic car, electric motors and relays. The advances followed one another in a way that soon the technology used in the first video games was surpassed. One of the responsible companies was indeed Dave Nutting Associates, whose arcade gunfight from 1975 was the first to use a microprocessor. A year later, Midway commissioned Dave Nutting Associates to manufacture an enhanced version of Sea Devil that introduced submarine combat simulators into the video game field, resulting now in Seawolf. Sega, Bally Manufacturing, Midway Manufacturing, Dave Nutting Associates, all of them were responsible to varying degrees for the birth of this video game, the most popular video game in 1976. True, Atari had developed tennis, racing, and tanks video games, but Midway was going to create shooters and video games about sea battles. Again, this machine is accompanied by a periscope that, as a novelty, is aiming at a screen. Following Sea Devil technique, its screen is actually hidden in the underneath. The player actually aims at a mirror that reflects the monitor where the different objectives sails, the slow freighters, the warships, and the fast-moving patrol torpedo boats, which give a score of 100, 300, and 700 points respectively. This time, the summary is based on the Seawolf class, a currently class of nuclear-powered fast-attack submarines whose origins date back to 1913. In addition, so as to increase the difficulty, the space between the submarine and the ships is full of mines that obstruct the player's torpedoes. Once the player has launched 5 torpedoes, there's a waste of precious required time that could cause not being able to win bonus time by reaching an operator set score. Seawolf sold very well, about 10,000 units in total, when the average was around 5,000 units. And did not take long for a sequel to be released, Seawolf 2. With a space for 2 players and a color display. Some improvements that, nevertheless, couldn't live up to expectation, resulting in 4,000 units sold. But what even so did actually set a precedent was the original version of Seawolf. 2 years after its release, Atari developed Battlezone, a tank video game that has a viewfinder in the shape of a rigid periscope, not able to be rotated. In 1983, Epix released a pack that included Gunfight and Seawolf 2 for 8-bit Atari systems. And Coastal Amusements, a company that manufactures arcade games for arcade amusement that is currently working in retro video redemption games, released its own 3D graphic version in 2008, despite the fact that it has no periscope, a version available since 2012 for iOS devices. What is certain is that Seawolf arrived as a result of a process of reinvention and effort at a time when copying and cloning were the rule. Video games were considered something related to the concept of toy and indeed still thought as a fad. It's a game that helped to fill the gap in the market of simulators a few years later, and that is not only part of the history of shooter games, but an indispensable classic game that remains able to offer hours of fun and entertainment. That's all for this episode of the YouTube channel of the Project Arcadiology. We hope you have enjoyed it. If you're interested in arcade video games, you can subscribe and, as always, Arcadian community, thanks for watching.
you.